So hello everyone, and welcome to this wonderful evening today. I am Babu Nair and I am the publisher of Banking Frontiers magazine. So we will get into this conversation, and for this conversation, Ashish, why don't you take the seat for this conversation? And I will also have another very interesting luminary whom we are going to discuss, and his name is Patanjali Somayaji, who is the Chief Technology Officer of Axio. Hi Patanjali. So great, fantastic to have these conversations with both of you. So let us just try to understand, Patanjali. You have been into this business of lending, and you have transformed yourselves from a B2B or an MSME funding or an SME funding to that of a end user or a B2C kind of funding. So in this entire journey, what has been the kind of bottlenecks that you have been facing? Right. And with that sudden escalation and scalability, how you have been going about? So can you throw some light about it?
So I think, like, to come to your the earlier analogy, we are like new wine in new bottle. If you look at our journey, it's been a very transformation journey from being predominantly an SME lender into building consumer DNA, consumer muscles in the organization and in the technology, and then today where we are at the forefront of consumer BNPL and other lending products, right? So obviously, when we transformed, we also had to transform our technology stacks. We had to transform, we leveraged the same technology stacks and the same processes that we had, and then adapted them. And the important parts of that are really that consumer brings in more scale, but it also changes a lot of the processes that you would have thought through. And so we had to go through a lot of that kind of re-engineering of every piece of the stack, every piece of the process that we did. So we also have the Walnut app, which is a consumer personal finance app, and we had that where we actually manage a lot of scale across processing SMSs of consumers, doing a lot of analytics on that. So we're able to bring the learnings from that into the whole consumer journey, where we now support real-time transactions on BNPL, on Amazon, on Razorpay partners, etc. Right? So a lot of this has been going very deeply into the processes and adapting them. Like, you could do a much longer turnaround time on something like an SME loan, whereas the same thing you cannot have on a consumer BNPL at checkout. Another example would be, you would do manual QC processes that are there in any kind of situation, right? Now, can you do away with the manual QC process in a consumer play? You can't, because there are always leakages in the system. There's always something that falls through to the manual queue. 100% automation is still something that everyone is working towards. But then the turnaround time for that is really 10 minutes versus what you could do QC in a batch process in a day. So that's the kind of transformation we had to bring in the journey that we had. So
interesting. And in this journey, how did you work with LeadSquare? What did you do there? One of the things we've always tried to do, so as a fintech, digitally native born, there is a tendency to build everything on your own. And that's how a lot of the stacks are built, if you look at the journeys of most tech and fintech companies. But what we need to focus on really is what is the part that we need to own, what is core to our IP, and what are other, coming to Ashish's earlier point about composability, what are the components that other people are experts in and would have honed a lot of processes and tech that and expertise that makes that a better build versus buy decision. A build versus buy decision is not very natural to a tech company. It's very natural when you're a bank to compose a lot of platforms, legacy, and work with partners. But for a fintech or at least a native tech company, it's not natural to go out and seek partnerships with other tech companies, right? It's almost not the DNA that we have. So as part of that transformation internally, where we moved from trying to be faster, get stuff working, we realized that there were pieces of the stack that were not really our DNA or our something that is very important from an IP perspective, but very important for us to give the best product from a customer experience, from an employee experience, etc. And that's where we work with LeadSquare on a bunch of engagements around the customer relationship space. So essentially, if there's anything where there's a physical process, where we're managing a team, we have a touch point with the customer where there is someone calling them, talking to them, sending them an email, then we use platforms. So we similarly use a bunch of other platforms. We believe that underwriting and the end consumer experience is something that is core to us, and anything that's outside that is something that we work with partners on.
Interesting. So from the banker's perspective, from the business of banking, what are those core niche areas where other than these conventional things that are there in a CRM or a experience management platform that are necessary to be added to, especially in this recent wake of things in the digital transformation world? Ashish, do you have any thoughts? What is happening?
In fact, as we look forward now, I think there's a bit of transformation happening around the core banking side also, right? So I think over the period of next 10 years, I think we'll see some transformation on the core side also, where people start looking at composability around that, right? Because I think there's some bit of realization that also is slowing it down. But overall, I think from a banking perspective, I think the ability, the big change that they'll have to factor in is on the product side, where they'll have to keep evolving on the products. And I think there's a big push on the co-lending side. So how do you partner with these to actually, expand your distribution network and expand the way you react to the market changes, right? I think that's where it's going to go.
Interesting. What kind of customization do you think organizations would like to bring in from time to time? And what kind of support do you need from the vendors then during this process?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest tenets of being a consumer-focused brand, and this is true for banks, it's true for fintechs, right, is that you have to be very agile on a bunch of fronts, right? So obviously, you have to be agile to customer feedback. Then I think it also is important that you have like a holistic view of agility, in the sense that it's like you can build fast and you can break fast, but in fintech you cannot break that fast also, right? You can be agile, but you shouldn't be fragile. Now,
that's a good one.
Yeah, so the thing is, like, and a lot of the outcomes that you see in finance are stuff that you may not see on day one. So you would lend today, but you would see bounce after 45 days and like real performance after 3 EMIs, right? But you have to be. So if you're just agile in launching the product, but you're not agile in reacting to bounce, you're not agile in reacting to 3 months later what happens, then so you need to build agility throughout the process, right? So this is kind of the thought process that you need to have overall. And then this is required, this agility is required in everything that you build out, right? So if you look at, if you're running a campaign with a third-party platform, and then you can't change the campaign midway, or then that platform doesn't work for you. If you're working on using a customer relationship tool where you have a form with 3 fields, and then you want to quickly change it to adding 4 fields, that can't take 6 months. So while a lot of fintechs take a call that they will build the platform for that agility. For example, we have built our own loan management system because we would like the agility to be able to manage a marketplace model with very complex settlements, etc. But then we are working with partners such as LeadSquared for pieces where they are agile on the front of components that we use. So it's pretty important that your agility is also there in the change that you're able to bring about and react to different customer patterns, different customer needs in every aspect of your business and tech. That I think is pretty important. So you have to go through, it's a very transformational journey across every component that you have. It's not just one thing.
Yeah. Interesting. You spoke about agile and fragile. And let me just ask Ashish about it. When you are trying to conventional organization into an agile organization, especially from the experience perspective, what are the key areas where you typically see the bottlenecks? Okay. And how do you work around these bottlenecks?
So typically, I think it's a bit of the mindset. It's one, because you have to change, because people are used to having things done in a certain way. Right? So you have to break that mindset that, no, you have to start thinking of doing smaller pieces, right? I mean, a lot of times, the concept of MVP doesn't fly with people because people think that let's build a Taj Mahal on day one, and that necessarily is not required, right? So you might want to start building your MVP, make your mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and as Patan said, be agile, don't be fragile. So while you make your mistakes, you don't have to be so fragile that the whole process breaks, right? Make, improve, and then go forward. And this is where the big challenge comes, because a lot of time organizations are not ready because the mindset is still, to work in silos and not as a team. And when we want to work in this kind of model, right, where we want to be really fast, you need all the teams that are working to start working together. It's not just one team, right? It's lead squad is one. Let's say your business team is one. You have your technology teams, which will bring in you the APIs and all, right? So you have to learn to adopt to that kind of working together, where all the teams have to work in sync. And that's where I think a lot of times we face a challenge, because while one team is very fast, the others are not on the same line, right? So you may not have your API ready, and then you're not able to move forward, right? And that's a challenge which is more of a mindset thing. Otherwise, I don't think there are too many limits today on how the organization.
Another thing that Patan, I have been seeing is the kind of leakages that happen in organizations. What are some of those strategies you think have been useful in plugging these kind of leakages?
Yeah, actually, so stepping back, when I started the fintech journey, so you would classify, I would think like, banks are more fin, less tech, and fintechs are less fin and more tech. But as you go through the journey, you realize that fintechs are basically more fin and more tech, right? So basically, all lending and allied operations are very process-heavy operations, irrespective of how much tech you put into it. And that actually lends to a lot of leakages throughout the whole journey that you have of working with your customer, working with your processes. And by nature, there are leakages everywhere, right? So your aim is to always kind of build in processes and do like a continuous improvement to make sure you have a smaller and smaller leakages in the system, right? So for example, the example I gave earlier, where you build an auto quality check platform so that you can do quality check at scale on, say, KYC. But that relies on optical character recognition, that relies on bunch of facial recognition, bunch of other technologies that work on that. Whatever tech you use will give you like 70% probability, 80% probability matches, right? Or you do fuzzy name checks to make sure you match across, say, UPI handle versus KYC versus POA, etc. Now you build that stack, but again, that is not going to be foolproof. So there are some leakages that come in because of the way your technology, because technology is not perfect in all of these things. And whatever your vendor, whatever tech team tells you, there is always going to be something, and you have to decide what you want to do about those leakages, right? So step one is you will start saying, let me launch this and let those customers go through. But then obviously, at some point you start looking at that and start plugging it at every point. Then there are other kinds of leakages which are really process and business related leakages, where maybe you have 4 products and you're launching 4 products, but there is no efficiency across them. So you need to bring them in one platform. And those are, so I think the process of actually bringing the leakages down is like a continuous kind of improvement process. As you launch, as you build, you clean up stuff, you take some early decisions, but then you're constantly on a journey to fix the leakages across.
Interesting. And what are the kind of matrices or metrics that you can see to measure the success of this?
So there's, in any business, there's obviously the, the lead metrics that you always see, right? So if it's lending, then you look at loss, you look at operating margins, you look at net interest income and all. But I think what helps us in the consumer business is to think from how consumer apps think, right? So if you look at, for example, consumer app lingo, it's very much like MAUs, DAUs, LTV, completely engaged customer, how much is your percentage conversions, right? So now when you marry both of these together, these kind of combinations are what will help you know what your leakage is, right? And what your efficiencies are. So as an example, like cohorts and funnels are something that are very consumer specific, right? Like a Zomato or Swiggy would be very looking at how many people clicked on this link, after this link, where did they go, and did they finally place the order, etc. Now that kind of cohort views is not like something that comes naturally to, in the financial space. And but the loss and the credit guys will be looking at cohorts from a calendar perspective, right? Not from a conversion perspective. So these are very subtle kind of things that you can bring in from consumer tech when you marry those two, where they help in plugging all of these kind of leakages.
Wonderful. I think that has been pretty interesting. What has been your experience in plugging the leakages and things like that?
No, I think just take a step back, and lead leakage is also a factor at times of the volume of leads you get, right? So you can have as many people who can react. So the ability to identify what's the right lead that you want to work towards and filtering out those leads which are actually noise, I think that I think is very important. So when I say that, if you're getting 100 leads who are interested in a personal loan, right, and that 40% of that, if you can do a spot check, and reject. You have a process which is automated process which can reject them, and then only the better quality leads that go into your funnel, right? So that you're reacting to the leads which are genuine that you want to respond to, right? And the second thing is what we have also seen is typically if you just do your lead scoring and a bit of follow-ups on that, if you combine that with something called as an engagement scoring, right? So different leads react to you differently. So someone who's responding to your communication, who's responding or reacting to your actions, right, typically is a more active engagement lead. So by trying to target or create these target these leads at a higher frequency, right, then you can drive a better conversion and also reduce the leakage that you see, because anyone who's more engaged, if you don't react to them or don't talk to them very quickly, might just move on, right? So I think these are two things. Automate some of these basic checks so that you're filtering out the leads which are not relevant. You draw down your funnel, and on the funnel then you try prioritizing based not just on a certain criteria, but also on the engagement that they have with you, to identify the right leads that you want to first focus on.
So we'll talk a lot more interesting stuff, but for now I would like to thank you two gentlemen for sharing this quick perspective.